The cemetery was silent in a way that felt heavier than noise. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A billionaire who owned cities of glass and steel stood frozen before a single slab of cold marble, his expensive coat doing nothing to protect him from the ache in his chest. He had come here many times before, but this time was different, because just a few steps away, beside his son's grave, a poor little girl was crying in a way that didn't ask for attention. It begged the universe for mercy. And when he finally heard her words, the strongest man in the business world collapsed, not from weakness of the body, but from the unbearable weight of regret. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion to change lives, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. The billionaire's name was Richard Hale, a man the world admired and feared in equal measure. He had built his empire from nothing, rising from poverty to unimaginable wealth through relentless ambition. Magazines praised his discipline, analysts admired his mind, and competitors respected his ruthlessness. But none of them knew the cost of his success. None of them knew that every night, behind the guarded gates of his mansion, he lived with a silence deeper than this cemetery. His only son, Daniel, had died 3 years earlier in a car accident, alone on a rainy road, after leaving a party his father never knew about. Richard had buried him with honor, with money, with marble and flowers, but he had never buried the guilt. Daniel had grown up surrounded by luxury but starved of presence. Richard was always traveling, always closing deals, always promising next time. He believed providing everything money could buy was the same as love. He believed time could be postponed, and by the time he realized how wrong he was, time had already taken its revenge. That morning, Richard had come to the grave earlier than usual. There were no reporters, no assistants, no drivers hovering nearby. Just him and the past. He knelt slowly, placing fresh white lilies on the grave, his hands trembling slightly as they always did here. He tried to speak, as he sometimes did, but the words refused to form. Apologies felt useless now. Promises were meaningless. All he could do was stand there, trapped between memory and regret. That was when he noticed the girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. Her clothes were thin, worn at the edges, clearly not meant for the cold morning air. Her shoes were mismatched, and her hair was tied back with a faded ribbon. She sat on the ground beside the grave, clutching a small, cracked photograph to her chest, tears streaming down her face. At first, Richard felt irritation flicker through him. This was private ground. This was his son's resting place. How did she even know to come here? But then he heard her crying more clearly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet kind of crying that comes when someone has no one left to hear them. Richard stepped closer, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel. The girl didn't look up. She didn't even seem to notice him. She was talking, not to Richard, but to the grave. She spoke about being cold at night, about missing someone who used to help her mother, about not understanding why good people leave too early. Her voice cracked as she said she was hungry, not just for food, but for safety. She said she wished the world was kinder. She said she wished fathers didn't forget their children. Those words hit Richard like a blow to the chest. He felt his knees weaken, the air left his lungs. Fathers didn't forget their children. The sentence echoed in his mind again and again. He suddenly realized this child wasn't trespassing. She wasn't lost. She was mourning someone too. Memories rushed back. Daniel as a teenager, asking his father to come to a school event. Daniel waiting by the window late at night. Daniel learning to stop asking. Richard had been physically present in his son's life only in photographs and headlines. Emotionally, he had been absent, and now, here was a poor child at his son's grave, crying because Daniel had been there for her in ways Richard never was for his own child. The girl finally looked up and saw him. Fear crossed her face. She tried to stand, apologizing clumsily, explaining that Daniel used to bring food sometimes, that he helped her mother when she was sick, that he talked to her when she felt invisible. She said she didn't know he was rich. She only knew he was kind. That was the moment Richard broke. He sank to the ground, his expensive coat brushing against the dirt, his hands covering his face as years of buried emotion poured out. He cried openly, uncontrollably, not caring who saw. For the first time since his son's death, he wasn't crying because Daniel was gone. He was crying because he finally understood who his son truly was, and how little he had known him. In that moment, something inside Richard shifted. The walls he had built around his heart, stronger than any skyscraper, crumbled. He saw his life clearly, the deals that didn't matter, the meetings that stole time, the wealth that could never buy back a missed childhood. He saw how Daniel, despite growing up with an absent father, had chosen to be present for others. The son had become the man Richard never was. Richard helped the girl to her feet gently. He listened as she told him about her life, her struggles, her mother's illness, the nights when Daniel had shown up with groceries and quiet encouragement. Every word felt like both a wound and a gift. Painful, because it revealed Richard's failures. Healing, because it showed his son's goodness lived on. After that day, Richard did not return to his mansion the same way. He didn't return to his boardroom unchanged. He began funding shelters, schools, and hospitals, but quietly, without his name carved in stone. He started a foundation in Daniel's name, not as a monument, but as a mission. More importantly, he became present. He visited the girl and her mother regularly. He listened, he learned, he showed up, but the greatest change was invisible. Richard learned to forgive himself, not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it through action. He learned that love delayed can become love denied, but love remembered can still be transformed into kindness. As the years passed, Richard continued to visit the grave, but the silence no longer crushed him. Sometimes the girl came too, healthier now, smiling shyly, leaving small flowers. Together, they stood as proof that loss can either harden a heart or open it wider than ever before. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about time, love, or the people you may have taken for granted, please pause for a moment and show your support. Like the video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more than you know. And before this story ends, I have one special request. Comment below and tell us who you would spend more time with if you were given a second chance. Because life doesn't measure us by what we own, but by who we were present for. And sometimes, it takes the tears of a child at a grave to remind even the richest man in the world what truly matters.